I'm Daniel Cremin. I'm here today in part because I'm the founder of an online Tory network called CORE, which is for Conservatives for Opportunity, Reform and Enterprise. And it's a sort of a network, a space online for liberal-minded Tories to come together and talk about the future of the party and the country and how, we have a kind of an optimistic approach to supporting enterprise, public services and civic renewal. I'm really pleased to be part of this panel today facilitating this session. We've got three really good speakers. I'll introduce them all in turn and give them each about 10 minutes initially to speak and then take questions for each. And then, if we have time, if people want to, we can open it up for questions for all afterwards. So I'll start with the first speaker. It's Laura, who's sitting to my right. Laura is communications manager at Bright Blue, and I think Bright Blue's been a really good feature of the landscape in recent years. Started life as a sort of a very similar to CORE, as a kind of bottom-up network for Liberal Tories, has really professionalised under Ryan Shorthouse into a really good think tank in the centre-right, making the running on issues like social justice and the environment. Laura's come in and I think she's really taken forward centre-right, which is their journal of ideas, and she has a really good podcast going now as well. So over to Laura first, who's going to be talking about a whole range of issues bound up in language and that need to reach out and not just win the battle of ideas, but also win hearts as we do so. Have that kind of optimistic vision for the country that builds affinity with the Conservative Party. So over to Laura.
I'm just going to sit down if you don't mind, a bit more comfortable. And don't worry, I'm not going to be speaking for 10 whole minutes. It's going to be far shorter than that. I think, firstly, I just want to lay out what we kind of all know already, is that the general election proves we have a problem. I think it was a massive wake-up call. I'm active in Kensington, which is considered, or always was considered, a safe seat, and we all know what happened there. You might have seen some articles today, I think it was on Labour List. They are being very active in targeting seats, such as Mark Field's seat in the City of Westminster, ones that we probably wouldn't have ever dreamt of being targeted. And many people believe that if an election was called today, the Conservatives would lose. And let's just ponder about this for a second, because this means we would lose to a hard left socialist Jeremy Corbyn. Now that isn't a wake-up call. I don't know what is. So everyone, I think this morning, Chloe Smith talked about the statistics that YouGov showed on younger voters, which are obviously deeply worrying. We are behind on Labour on so many issues, including housing. We've always been the party for housing. Apparently we're not at this moment in time. Now I'm obviously a younger voter, but I just don't fall under the young voter category. So I don't have younger siblings. I don't talk to the 18-year-olds every day. When I do, I love asking them, about their politics. What did you vote? What are your friends voting, and why? Now, luckily, a lot of people I spoke to voted Conservative, but they all say all my friends voted Labour. Why? Some of it's about policies. Tuition fees was huge. Some of it came down to they love grime, and seeing Jeremy Corbyn being advocated by grime artists really got them going. But a lot of it is about perception. So what do they think about Conservatives? They think Conservatives are just for old, posh people. What do they think about Jeremy Corbyn? He cares. So they mistakenly think that Conservatives lack empathy. And we all know that's wrong, but we need to start communicating that. Now, this isn't just an issue about younger voters, but it is, I think, a very important part of it. Our Prime Minister already spoke about this when she was party chairman. We've had this label of nasty party for a long time. I'm of the opinion that a lot of great work was done over the past number of years, and I think, sadly, a lot of that's been undone in the last year. So the 2 points of discussion that I want to encourage you all to participate in today is about explaining our motives and values. I think Conservatives can be better at explaining why we advocate certain policies. We often fall short of just saying, what our policies are and giving the hard facts. I think we should find a way. I'm not saying we've got the answers, but hopefully some of you here do today. To find a way to, when you lay out a policy, to explain why. When it comes to lower, less business regulation or business tax, it's not because we're just there for big business. It's because we believe it will promote employment. Another thing that I found quite striking is, and this was a point made to me recently by the former director of communications in Downing Street under Cameron, is you might have noticed the Conservative Party hasn't been talking about the deficit as much in the last year, especially in the run-up to the election. Now, what did that vacuum of us taking control of that narrative of deficit, what did that provide? I think it provided the opportunity for Labour to come in and replace it with austerity. And austerity has been dominating the narrative in the run-up to the election. Now, the second thing might be a little bit provocative, but for for some of you who were here in the same tent this morning might have heard Lord Andrew Cooper talk about some of his polling around values. And he said that when you compare open to closed values or insular values, actually the large part of the voting population share the closed values. Now, that kind of poses two questions. Does that mean the Conservative Party needs to go after those voters and advocate those values? Are we going to be led by the polls? Or, as a more philosophical question, as a political party in a movement, does the Conservative Party have the responsibility to stand up and fight for what they believe is right? Now, Cameron did this famously with a same-sex marriage, which obviously got him as a big gamble. He got a lot of slack. We lost a lot of members. The Conservative Party lost a lot of members, but it paid off. At the end of it, after a couple of years, it wasn't raised on the doorstep as much. And also tying it into younger voters, I think most of the younger voters actually share more of the more open, outward-looking values. So I would argue, I work for Bright Blue, we're Liberal Conservatives. I would argue that the Conservative Party needs to be more forward-looking and take that risk and start advocating policies and underlining policies and sharing the values that we have that would resonate with those people. One example is the environment. It's huge. All the polling, and we've got some very exciting polling coming out next week, demonstrates how important that is. The Conservative Party is not talking about it. We've done quite a lot of good things, but the press or Number 10, whoever is in charge, is making sure it comes out on days where it doesn't get as much attention. Anyways, I will end on a note that I believe the Conservative Party needs to re-establish its social liberal reputation, and that's mainly by talking about our values more. Thank you.
Great. So questions from the floor for Laura. Anybody want to kick off?
So reflecting on a conversation I had with some young people on a train who I didn't know, who were all Corbynistas and Momentum type individuals, they couldn't understand why anyone would be a Conservative. They didn't have an understanding of why. And I worry that when we talk about policies and we sort of think about, well, what policies do we need to address to attract young people and all the rest, if we don't marry it with an intellectual argument of what is a Conservative, what is our fantastic history, why, let's really advertise everything about, personal responsibility, about duty, and you can't have you can't have the equality of socialism that it promises if you aren't rooted in a sense of duty of the individual and of the institution.
No, I think you're right.
And I really, as we're talking here today, I just really wish we push our politicians relentlessly to be making arguments that just, whenever they make a policy argument, they link it in with the history of why they're a conservative, why they hold those values. Because I think that's where actually young people get turned on, as well, as they understand like the why of Jeremy Corbyn. They sort of get that, because they think, oh, he wants to make a difference. They think Tories want to like protect rich people, and we've got to win that fight.
You just made my point a lot better than I did earlier. You should probably be here. I think you're right, and I think there's what is conservatism? This is a question I actually asked a number of MPs a couple of weeks ago for our next Centre-Right magazine, which you very kindly plugged earlier, which is coming out at Party Conference, and they all give different answers, right? And they're all great answers, and they're all really important, and they're all part of conservatism, but we need to be more clear, and as you say, stress more what it is and underlie it. I mean, I had one politician say shortly after the election, it's like, I don't really know what our values are. I'm just going along with it, but I don't really know what they are. And that's a problem.
Yeah, I don't think the party at all invests in this. We talk about it as important, but I don't know how much money is really put in by the party into events like this to promote the intellectual side of what conservatism is, to educate people on the history. And we're just missing a trick, because we've got a great resource, we've got a great history. I'm so proud of my conservative history, as it were, going back to Edmund Burke.
I mean, you're up against it, ultimately. We've got a party that has decided to sell student debt. We've got kids who are now paying 6%, where they were paying significantly less than that. And in some cases, my son's case, he's not even meeting the interest payment, and he's a bloody accountant, for heaven's sake. So he's earning quite a bit in comparison. So that's a wrong 'un. The next thing, as far as the young people is concerned, is we simply struggle to relate. We're not rebellious. We're too parental. We're too in your face and old and stuffy. And I mean, that's just a fact. It's something that we'll struggle to change going forwards, but it is just a fact. And my son, my youngest son, he's a Corbynista, and he's also a music student at Goldsmiths. So what do you expect? But ultimately, he hasn't experienced tax, so when he doesn't get taxed, because we're now a no-tax party for the first 11.5 grand, he doesn't know any different, because he's never been taxed. So it's not like, oh, this is brilliant. It's just the same as it's always been. So we're just not relating to those people who are coming through, because the stuff we put in place is either really crap or done, and it's the first time they've experienced it, and it's always been there.
That's really interesting. And just, I think a lot of your points are very good ones. And I just finished, because I think Olivia's talking on it is going to kind of continue this conversation with what she's about to say. But also what the gentleman said earlier is conservatives in our nature, we don't shout about it. We're not the ones who are sharing posts on Facebook about politics. If you work in politics, we'll be on Twitter, but none of my friends are on Twitter, or not actively. And I've got to confess, I'm guilty. I don't like putting my political thoughts into put it on my feeds so that all my friends know what I think about it. It's like, probably don't care. It's like, talk about it when I see them. It's a bit obnoxious, but the left are really good at sharing and sharing and sharing. So maybe we do need to step up to the plate.
We've been bullied off social media.
Okay, and now it's over to Olivia, who is at Reaction, the media partner for today. She's news editor there and writes a lot about, as well as education reform, looks at youth issues and kind of, how youth and politics interlace and so forth, and, has some really interesting thoughts for us today, I believe, about what's driven millennial disengagement traditionally with politics, but why now the left have surged in the last election cycle, and what the centre-right can do to respond to some of that. Thank you, Olivia.
Thank you. Thanks. Quite a big up. So I'm going to follow on from a lot of what Laura was saying, but I'm 23, and apart from a few friends who are probably in this tent right now, I don't think any of my friends voted Conservative. It's a seriously big issue. And I think what's quite interesting is it's not just that they didn't vote Conservative, it's that since they didn't vote Conservative in the last election, which was now 3.5 months ago, the Conservative Party doesn't really seem to have done anything to attract them, they still definitely wouldn't vote Conservative. And I think quite a lot of the problems since the last election have been that instead of looking at what went wrong and trying to work out how to address exactly what went wrong, grabbing the nettle, the Conservatives have been going about thinking of kind of little tricks little optical illusions they can use to bring round these young people and get them to vote Conservative. So instead of saying what was wrong, why was our manifesto so unattractive to these young people, the Conservatives have been saying things like, let's make a activate group, and like someone suggested to me a Jacob Rees-Mogg Snapchat filter, and it's like, that's not the answer. And there's also this generation of our sort of parents' generation. I genuinely heard this politician who was beaming, saying to me, no, I know what the answer is. There's this insurgent new group on Facebook called Unilad. If we can just get in with Unilad, then we're sorted. And like, some of you may not know what Unilad is, but it's got 30 million followers on Facebook already. It's not insurgent and new, and the Conservatives aren't going to find a sneaky way into Unilad. Like, that's not how it works. So I think what the Conservatives need to do is, really what we all need to do, is work out what exactly went wrong at the last election, and a lot of it Laura mentioned. But I think a couple of things we haven't yet touched on is the sort of intra-party Brexit wars are so boring to the vast majority of people. Like, yes, a lot of young people voted to remain in the European Union. I voted to remain in the European Union. I was pretty passionate about it at the time. I had a Stronger In t-shirt. Like, I was really keen. But it didn't take me that long to think, okay, right, we're leaving the EU, and okay, we'll move on with that. And I know some people are a lot more passionate, but the ones who are more passionate aren't going to be voting Conservative. Like, we are the party of Brexit because we are implementing what the people said, because that's what we always said we were going to do. So no young person's going to pick up on these kind of backbench Brexiteers who are Anna Soubry's of the world, who are saying, no, we can still battle it out. If you're an arch Remainer, you're going to be voting Lib Dem. Just give up on those. This Brexit wars, it's irritating the 48% who voted to remain. It's reminding them all the time that Brexit's happening, reminding them. And it's boring the 52% who voted to leave because they don't care. I mean, that's a serious issue, and it's all that we're seeing from the Conservative Party at the moment. We've got so much of these Brexit wars, and it seems to anyone on the outside that it's a party sort of so riddled with angst about this single issue that it's forgotten that there's so much going on in the rest of the country. I think the other big problem, which we haven't yet mentioned, is this kind of Conservative obsession with class. And I think watching Theresa May on the One Show in the run-up to the election was excruciatingly awkward, because she's just trying to appeal to this. She's got this very patronising sort of idea, and I'm sure it's not her, but there's this idea that they have to appeal to the lower middle classes and the just about managings. And to my generation, that doesn't make sense, I think, for two reasons. One is that this just about managing thing doesn't really appeal to you if you're an aspirational young person. Like, I'm probably just about managing. Like, I'm not earning very much. I'm, living, thinking, oh God, not being paid for another 4 days. How am I going to cope? Technically, I'm just about managing, but I don't think of myself as just about managing, because I'm on the bottom of the ladder trying to get up to somewhere new. And I think a lot of young people feel like that. Like, they don't want to be told, like, poor old you, we'll sort you out. They want to be given, entrepreneurial young people want to be given a message of aspiration and want to be told the Conservative Party is a ladder, and we can help you climb this ladder, and we can help you get somewhere. You don't want to be told, oh dear, poor old you. It's just so patronising. And I think the other reason it doesn't work is because lower middle class just doesn't, these small, rigid class barriers, I think, have kind of eroded. Like, I think a lot of my generation, if pushed, could say sort of working class, middle class, upper class. We've got friends and acquaintances who are kind of aristocracy, but the vast majority of us are just kind of normal, I guess, middle class. And then, I've got a friend whose dad's a taxi driver, and she's now going into investment banking, and she's living in a beautiful house in Putney because she's rich, because she's an investment banker, and she went to a grammar school and Russell Group University, and all her friends are sort of posh, but it's like, what, but her dad's a taxi driver. So where does she fit into that? And like, when she changes jobs, where's she going to fit in then? And like, it's all just so much more fluid than it used to be. And so this kind of trying to pin down the lower middle classes when they're flitting in and out anyway, and also were hard to pin down anyway, it's kind of like trying to cut water in your hands. Like, they're going to change so many times that these kind of targeting campaigns don't really work anymore. So those are the problems as far as I can see. And I think the solution, and it's a very simple solution, is stop concentrating on the optics. Like, being a conservative just isn't really ever going to be cool. We're never going to have like crowds at Glastonbury, and I don't think that's what we should be aiming for. We've got the policies that make sense, so let's start thinking about it. And I think that's why I'm pleased that Reaction's the sponsor of this festival. I think that's what we're doing here, and I think a lot of the press have got it wrong when they talk about a Tory Glastonbury, because that's not what it is. It's people coming together and talking about ideas, and I think that's just so what we need right now. And I think there are two things, and we've talked about it over and over again, but what the gentleman, this guy, was saying about his son, he's so right about the two big things, I think, are housing, and I don't pretend to be an expert, but I know that the situation is dire, and I know that there are solutions, whether that's building on the green belt, whether that's, I mean, there's so many people here who can talk to you about that, but there are those people who need to be engaged, and they are getting engaged, and if we concentrate on that. And the other thing is student loans, and it's just ridiculous. Like, the policy at the moment is actually punishing aspiration in this bizarre way. I was looking at it, and it's quite scary what's going on. So the point of the 6.1% interest rate is that when you take out, what we tell 18-year-olds when they take out these horrible loans and get told they're going to be saddled with £50,000 worth of debt is, oh, well, don't worry, you'll never pay it back. Well, okay, fine, but someone's going to pay it back, because the money doesn't just, it's got to come from somewhere, and it will come from somewhere. Sorry.
So we're just going to open it up in a moment,
Yes.
if we can, for
Yeah,
questions.
yeah.
If you just want to finish your point, and then we'll get back to some questions.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, it will come from somewhere else. So what's happening is that the people on the, if you're lower, and if you start very low on the scale, then you'll accrue interest over your lifetime. But because you'll be earning not enough to be reaching, you'll keep on paying back, and in the end it'll just be written off. So you're kind of okay if you're starting on kind of 21 grand. If you're starting big money, if you're starting an investment bank and you're starting on 50 grand, you'll pay it off so quickly you won't have time to accrue that much interest. It's the people in the middle, the kind of aspirational people who are making the best of their degree, who are using their degree as they should be using their degree to get a good job doing something interesting and rewarding. They're the ones who are being completely screwed over, because they're paying back, through their 6.1% interest, they're paying back the loans of the people who fled the country or decided not to really bother using their education at all. And a policy that punishes aspiration just doesn't make sense. So we need a policy, and there are loads of ideas. There's a fantastic IEA report. Ross McWilliams over there pointed it out to me, and I recommend you all read it, because there are just so many ideas of how to get that working again. And yeah,
funnily enough, I work in the university world, and that's fantastic. And your point, I think, is really interesting around the repayment rate and that sense of psychology. So in Australia, on average, they repay in under 9 years their full loan. An undergraduate. They can also borrow more to go and do postgrads and so forth. We've only recently brought out a postgrad loan. So if you're thinking about fixing higher education, one sector that I would really say, one country system I'd say has got a really interesting loan is Australia, and this idea of the fair go, that everybody gets a chance to go. But it's because it's a lower overall repayment for the student, because the public subsidy is up front, whereas in our country it's hidden. As Olivia was saying, is that actually there's huge public subsidy going on through the RAB estimate mechanism, but people just feel there's this big psychological debt, and that potentially over time could become off-putting as well to people from lower socio-economic backgrounds to go. Hasn't been the case to date, but the public debate around this is hardening. So as a party, I think we need to look imaginatively and internationally at how other countries manage this system. But over to the audience for questions. First question over there. And if you could pass the microphone on to where I point next.
Sure. Hi, I was quite struck just now about the debate about the difference between Corbyn and the way that he approached, and listening to you talk about conservative and done loads of stuff on the environment, but we kind of hid it in And I kind of, for me, one of the big differences between the two parties at the moment is the way in which the Labour Party have embraced engagement and have empowered their foot soldiers to really work on their behalf without trying to control them. And so my question is, what can we do to really engage and find those foot soldiers to fight that war on our behalf without feeling that we've got to control everything that goes out there? So how do we help them to experiment and be really creative in that engagement?
Yeah, I think you're addressing a really important point, because it's so tough when I can't believe what Momentum are doing. It's incredible. Like, I don't know how they do it, but I don't think there's a kind of quick route for us. I don't think we can imitate Momentum. I think what they've got is very specific to the way that Corbyn's entire mentality works, which is a kind of very much grassroots up. He doesn't have his own policies. He's driven by these young people who are marching for him because they're marching for themselves, because that's the way Corbyn's policies work. So I don't think we can really imitate that. I think the answer is we get these sensible policies in place, and I think it's just going to be a slow process of young people just thinking, oh, wait a minute, Corbyn's sort of cool, but like, wait, I work in this job, and actually that makes so much more sense for me, and I want to start my own company. And the Conservatives think I won't tell anyone, but I'll just vote Conservative. And then you get these quiet Conservatives, which is always what wins us elections, the quiet Conservatives who think, oh, actually, I'm more interested in what the Conservatives have to say. So I don't think we will, is the answer, ever get foot soldiers marching for us. I hope we will, but I don't think we will. And yeah, a slow approach is the way to go.
Next question here, and then that gentleman at the back, actually, I'll come to you later.
The gentleman asked how we engage activists without a top-down approach. I suggest there hasn't even been that one yet. I mean, if you look at Mark Wallace's articles on the dissection of CCHQ's election, it was basically like, good luck. And if you look at the history, Labour, grassroots activism, trade unionism, Momentum. The Conservatives, well, we haven't really thought about it, but what did we have? We once had the largest voluntary association in history with the Tory Primrose League after Benjamin Disraeli. And that's what we need again. We need a conservative response. We need a hierarchy. We need associations to say, I'm in charge, this is who's below me, these are my members. And when you sign up, you need to be contacted by your association. And when you move places, you don't need to be like, I'm still getting emails from Norfolk and I don't get the ones from Surrey because I moved counties and it's CCHQ. And frankly, we don't need Tory Momentum. We need the Primrose League in the 21st century.
Okay, Olivia, and then Laura on that, and then the gentleman just behind you. But Olivia first, yeah?
Well, that wasn't really a question, just here, yeah, I agree with everything you say.
Someone pointed out to me the other day that actually, Tom's up, very quickly, that we probably had Tory type of momentum before we actually realised it, except we managed to, I'm not going to swear, but we effed it up with the whole bullying scandal. But we did have a pretty good operation there.
Plenty of time. Still plenty of time, I think. Yeah. Can we ask that question, and then we'll turn over to Tom in a moment.
Yeah, so I just want to kind of ask, how much does the panel think that the playing of Corbyn, rather than the actual policies, played such a detrimental effect to our campaign chances? Instead of going after the policy, going after his kind of economics and how he kind of promised so much to get young people on side, and he would never be able to deliver. And if we had ripped apart his actual policy piece by piece, explained it in a way that was easy to kind of understand that this is never going to add up, instead of going after him because of the person he is, because of how he kind of acts, how he speaks, it's just, it's just terrible to kind of think that we were actually kind of attacking a person rather than his policies that he was portraying.
Okay, thanks. Any quick response on that, Olivia?
Well, I wish tearing apart his policies would have worked. I actually don't think it would have done. I think it sounds so cliched, but people do want hope, and tearing apart people's policies doesn't seem to work, and young people seem to like those policies. So I think what we should have offered is a positive message of capitalism and entrepreneurialism and aspiration, and the positives of conservatism is what we were missing, I think, more than the negatives of Corbyn's policies.
I'm just going to introduce Tom quickly. Tom is a consultant at Kanto, which is a digital and data consultancy, works on political campaigns and persuasion, social issue campaigns around the world. Thank you, Tom. Over to you.
Fantastic points by all the previous speakers. Thank you very much. A few really quick things just to highlight. Message discipline really matters. Obviously, I would say that as a campaign coordinator. I run the digital data side of campaigns. I can spend £1 million on Facebook in under 12 hours. I spent on a certain referendum many of you have heard of about 3 billion contacts out to different residents across the United Kingdom. We broke the United Kingdom up to 72 different groups of people. Your online communities really matter. There's hundreds of thousands of people that can read your tweets, your Facebook messages, your Instagram posts. Too often, we'll knock on a few doors, we'll go to lunch, and we'll call it a day's canvassing. That's just not good enough in the 21st century. We must do a better coordinated digital approach. What's that mean for a typical person running for election next May? Is that 2-3 video posts, 1-2 Instagram messages, a few tweets, perhaps, but it might be even more than that. Too often you'll meet a campaign plan that is 18 pieces of literature, thank you very much, all done. Please, never ever do that. So, what is the role of a campaign? Campaigns are there as content creators. One of the finest examples of campaign creation was the I, Daniel Blake movie. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but it is an absolutely fabulous movie. And I would like to ask you each the question, what would be the capitalist rebuttal to that movie? You might have seen the Brexit movie, another similar work of art. The concept of putting persuasion, easy arguments, approachable. If you can't explain your argument after 3 pints in the pub, it's too complicated. Quality matters. Everything you do should be focus grouped. ABC split testing. You can test, you can retest. Now, a lot of people on the subject of digitalness talk about online democracies. There's a huge election occurring this weekend, obviously, in Germany. We're working on a project with University College London and Google. There is only one political party that is doing Russian language advertisement. That's the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland. They are approaching 3 million people watching their content, and they are doing it unrebutted in Russian. This is a huge threat to what many of you call the stability of Europe. We must make sure that we engage, and a failure to engage in people's local language, that isn't us using the same wording on an Instagram or a Twitter post. It's about changing our language to the content of the medium we do it in. Voting and electronic voting. Do not fear electronic voting. It's going to be absolute chaos. There was going to be a fabulous election last year that never happened, and that was an election between Theresa May and Andrea Leadsom. That was going to be decided on an online ballot. It was going to be the first time that a leader in a Western country was chosen with an online ballot. It would have been so much fun. Almost identical system to that used in Kenya, and we know how that went. Basically, a lot of these systems are highly secure. The problem is the implementation, and you have people that do not understand how to look at an electronic system. There's a few of us that are certified by the UN that go around and look at these things. It's hugely concerning for the purposes of online democracy. Happy to talk on anything from online voting to Facebook and tweeting.
I'm sorry, I think we've got another session has been impromptu organised, but we're going to take a quick question. Yeah.
One last question here, and then we can basically move on. Yeah.
It's more of a point touching on a point over here, a comment from yourself. Sorry, I can't see your name. Olivia? And Tom. So I think the question or the comment was something along the lines of, how do you galvanise foot soldiers for the Conservative Party? And the comment that I picked up on from yourself was that that's never going to happen. and the comment from yourself was about engagement. Now, all of those three things tie into one thing, relatability. Now, if you don't have people who can relate to the demographic of people you're trying to reach out to, then of course it's never going to happen. If the whole party has the output that it can't happen, then it's never going to happen. I run a charity that has worked with young people in schools, and the schools got my charity in to deal with hard-to-reach kids. Why? Because the teachers in the school couldn't relate to the children, but the people in my charity could. And now 6 out of 9 of those kids that we've worked with have just gone to university this September. So everything boils down to relatability. The people you're trying to reach have to relate to the message that you're giving them for them to believe in your purpose and your message. And without that, then you're never going to be successful in what you want to achieve.
That's very good. Very fantastic. That's it. I'll have to run. So, thank you.